Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Jocelyn and I am an online teacher teaching both English and Spanish on several different platforms. And I am really excited about today's video because today we are going to dive into the Outschool application and how you can get accepted as a teacher on this platform. Before beginning this video though, I do want to remind you that there are certain requirements that you have to meet before you can apply to be an Outschool teacher. So I'm going to link that video up above if you haven't watched it already, or if you aren't familiar with the requirements that you need to meet before applying. Definitely go check that out before you watch this video, because this video is all about the application process. I'm going to take you step by step and give you lots of good tips on how you can pass this application process and begin teaching on the Outschool platform. So the very first thing that you are going to have to do if you'd like to apply for Outschool is to create an account. It's going to ask you for an email address, and then you'll create a password for your account. And then once you log in for the first time, you will have the option to go to apply. And the great thing about this application process is it's very straightforward and clear. Over here at step 1, of course, they have learn about Outschool. So there are 2 different videos that you can watch that are going to cover the basics of what it means to be an Outschool teacher. And then you can also take a look at their teacher guide, which is going to give you some further guidance just to make sure that this is in fact the platform that you should be applying to. Once you learn a little bit more about Outschool, then you can actually begin the nitty-gritty of filling out your application. Step 2 is pretty straightforward, right? They're asking you for your public teacher name. That's the name that parents and families are going to see on your profile. You can edit it later. My public teacher name is just Miss Jocelyn. So you could choose Miss something, Mr. something, teacher, Brian, however you would like to be referred to in the classroom. Then below that, you can list your full legal name, and this cannot be edited later. So just make sure that you type it in correctly and you don't have any spelling mistakes. You'll need to add your email, your phone number, just in case Outschool ever needs to contact you by that, and then your location, city, state, and country. And make sure that the city, state, and country is within the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, or the United Kingdom, because you need to be a full-time resident of one of those countries in order to teach on this platform. If you happen to put someplace in Ecuador, for example, they're not going to accept your application because you're not located full-time in one of those countries that they need you to be a full-time resident of in order to teach on the platform. Once you get all of those basic things out of the way, then you're going to begin to list some of your teaching experience. Remember that to be an Outschool teacher, you do not have to be a formally educated teacher, meaning you don't need a formal teaching certificate and you also don't need a teaching degree. But what they do want to see is that you have experience working with students between the ages of 3 to 18, which are the ages of the students that are going to be taking classes on the Outschool platform. So it doesn't have to be anything formal. You could list babysitting experience, you could list being a camp counselor, you could mention if you've worked in an after-school program, a mentoring program, anything like that. If you were a teacher assistant, for example. So there are lots of different experiences that you could have had that are going to meet this requirement of you have experience working with youth. And you also want to make sure that you're being specific with how long you've worked with the youth, the subjects that you've taught, and the ages of the learners that you've worked with. A pro tip when you are completing this section of the profile, and really any step in this process, is make sure that you are not just putting bullet points, but you're actually writing in complete sentences. Because if you notice on the requirements page of Outschool, they want to make sure that you have excellent written and communication skills. By writing in complete sentences and not just doing bullet points, they'll be able to see that you can effectively communicate in English. You can see here I just did one example. I did do a bullet point, but I have several sentences underneath it written in a complete format. So I say, after completing my 4-year degree, I had the opportunity to work as a site coordinator for an after-school program in the Rochester City School District. This program worked with students K through 6th grade and offered activities in the arts, athletics, and academic realm. I would then go on to say that I was a site coordinator for 1 year before being promoted to another position within the company, right? So then I'm letting them know the subjects that I've taught, the ages of the learners that I've worked with, and then how long I did this particular work. I would then also probably want to include that I was a VIP kid teacher, that I've worked online and taught English on Cambly, that I have volunteered at several different schools as an English tutor and as a mentor. So I would want to list any relevant professional experience where I was working with kids. I would not want to add in this section that I worked at a restaurant, for example, unless it's somehow tied back to either a subject that I would like to teach, like if I wanted to teach, how to cook or something, or, life skills like dishwashing, being polite, So you want to make sure that it's all relevant information, either relating back to working directly with youth, or it's going to relate back to the different subjects that you ultimately want to teach on the platform. Once you have listed any and all relevant experience working with youth, whether as a professional, a volunteer, or in your personal life, then we can go down and we can list any academic degrees, teaching credentials, current or expired, professional training, or other relevant professional certifications that you have. And remember, Outschool doesn't require that you need a degree in order to teach on the platform, so that's not necessarily what they're looking for. If you have that, great, but if you don't, you might have other academic degrees or certificates or training programs that you've completed that are still going to qualify you to work and teach on this platform. So when you're thinking about this, again, you want to make sure that it's all relevant information. So either, listing those degrees that are going to relate back to the topics that you are ultimately going to want to teach on the platform, or different trainings that you've had that are going to relate back to the subjects you want to teach on the platform, or to potentially working with children. Always think before you're putting it on here, is this relevant information? Does this relate back to the subjects I want to teach? Does it show that I am a professional person? Does it show that, I work with children in some capacity? Making sure that it's all relevant information. For example, if I had received some professional training in the culinary arts, which I haven't, this is just an example, but I wouldn't list that here unless I wanted to teach cooking classes on the platform or a culinary class on the platform, right? Because it wouldn't relate back to the subjects that I want to teach. I teach some arts and crafts classes as well as Spanish classes on Outschool. I don't teach cooking classes, so I'm not going to put it here. But I would if I wanted to have a culinary arts class, right? Because it would show that I have professional training in this field and that families should trust me because, I have some training and I have a background in it. Also, when you are completing this section of the application, make sure that you include the year that you've received this training or this degree or certificate, as well as the subject and the state or institution. So, for example, I just have two examples here. So I said I received my bachelor degree in art history and Spanish from Nazareth College in December of 2016. What I would also want to add to this sentence was that it was from Nazareth College, located in Rochester, New York, right? Because it also wants the state that I received this in. And then the second one is I completed my TEFL, and then in parentheses, I say Teaching English as a Foreign Language certificate in the spring of 2019 from International TEFL Academy. And again, I would also want to add probably that International TEFL Academy is located in Chicago, I believe. So, each time I'm making sure that the application is complete and that I am giving them all of the information that they've requested, right? Because if I omit something like that, that's an easy way for them to be like, oh, they don't really pay attention. They didn't give us what we asked. So we're just going to ignore this application. Really be sure and double check that you have answered each and all of the questions that they have asked. Also, please, if you have any acronyms in your certificate or for your degree or something like that, like you can see here that I put it's a TEFL certificate. I'm very familiar with what a TEFL certificate is, but I don't know if the person who is reading my application is. So in parentheses, I'm gonna write out the full name of what that actually means. And I highly, highly suggest you do the same for your certificates and for, any of your professional trainings and things like that, because you don't necessarily know if the person reading your application is familiar with what that acronym stands for. Once you have completed that section, then we can move down to this section, which is actually optional. So it just asks if you have any online profiles, like a professional website, a Facebook page, a LinkedIn profile that might help describe some of your experience and or expertise. So this is optional if you don't have a website, if you're not on LinkedIn. Don't stress out about this. But if you have them, it's a nice thing to add to just round out your application. Step 3 is a little bit more related directly to the Outschool platform and what you will ultimately be doing on the platform, right? They want to know about what kind of classes you are going to offer, and they want to know what those classes would look like, right? They kind of want to get into your mind and think, okay, if they're going to be offering classes on my platform, what are they going to add to the Outschool platform? Are they teaching a subject that maybe we have a need, we have parents requesting a lot for these topics and we don't have enough teachers, or maybe they're teaching it in a very creative and unique way that we haven't seen from other teachers, right? They want to make sure that you are going to add something to their platform, that you're going to bring something new and unique to you, right? In the way that you deliver, give your classes, or maybe the subject that you want to teach. The first section up here is where you're going to basically let them know what ages of learners would you like to work with, what experience or expertise do you have in these areas. So you could kind of go up and look at maybe some of the degrees that you have or the certificates or professional training you've received, and relate that back to, what you ultimately want to teach. For example, for me, I listed that I have a bachelor's degree in Spanish, that I have studied abroad in many Spanish-speaking countries, that I worked in a school in Spain as a teacher assistant, all to show, okay, I do speak Spanish. I am qualified to teach Spanish to people. I also did list that I am TEFL certified, right? That teaching English as a foreign language, because even though it's a different language, having that background in how does one teach a language, I felt related, and supported that I am qualified to teach this subject. And because I do offer some arts and crafts classes, and in the past I have done more art classes as well, I listed, that I worked and volunteered in an art museum and a teaching program, that I have a degree in art history, right? Everything that just kind of relates back and says, hey, this person is qualified to teach these subjects. So you want to make sure that you're mentioning, the topics that you're passionate about teaching. In my case, it was both Spanish and art classes, the ages of the learners that you would like to work with, and then, thinking about your experience and basically what makes you qualified to teach these subjects. And something that you could also take a look is that they do have this recent topic requests here, and this basically means that these are topics that parents and families have requested and are looking for on the platform. So if you take a look at this list and see, oh my gosh, somebody is looking for an art history class on Monet. Well, I have an art history degree. I like Monet. I could teach that class. Then that might be a really good class to list here, because then Outschool can see, hey, this teacher can offer a class that we've had parents request and want on the platform. So if you're kind of at a loss and you're like, I have lots of different passions, I'm not really sure what I want to teach, then definitely take a look at that recent topic request, because if you can fill a need and a gap that Outschool has, it's going to be really valuable and it's going to make your application stand out. Once you have talked about, the different classes that you think you would like to teach on the platform, next, you're going to essentially create a class listing. So the way that they frame this is that they say, let us know what your class will look like. Write a sample class description below. You should write this description as though it is for prospective families, including information about what you will teach, how you will teach it, what learners should expect from class. This field is only for our team and will not be published on the site. And it should at least be a paragraph long. And if you're not sure where to start, you can go and check out some sample class listings for new teachers. I highly recommend checking out those sample class listings, or literally going on Outschool and looking at what teachers have written for their class descriptions to get an idea of what has been approved to be published on their site. Because if it was good enough to be approved and published on the actual site, then as long as you have those same elements that those teachers put, this section is going to be really good. And again, make sure that you are including an answer to every single one of these questions. You state what you will teach, how you will teach it. And that pretty much just means, are you going to use a Canva presentation? Are you going to have class discussions, or is it a more lecture-based classroom? How are you going to engage students? Are you going to play games? Do you start the class with an introduction to the new material and then you play Jeopardy, right? So you want to add how you are going to kind of facilitate this with your students, right? Are you going to do an I do, we do, you do kind of format, right? The teacher introduces it, you do something all together, and then you have the student do it independently. Those are all different things that you can add about how you're going to actually teach your subject. And then talking about what learners should expect from class. Are there any materials that they are going to need? Is there going to be a lot of classroom participation, right? If it's a class where you're going to be doing debates, for example, right? Is the student going to be expected to speak a lot in the class, right? Or is it something more where they're going to be kind of sitting and like taking notes? So basically, letting them know what they can expect from the class time. And they do mention that what you write here is not going to be published on the site, but something that I definitely recommend to teachers that I have helped go through the application process is, when you create this class description, think about an actual class that you would like to teach on the platform. Because if you save what you write here, once you get approved, you can use that same class description as your first class listing, right? You're already kind of doing the work up front, and you're going to be so ready once you get approved to just go on and begin listing your first class because you have your class description already. I definitely suggest writing out a class description for a class that you ultimately do want to teach on the platform, because it's going to save you time later on when you do begin listing those classes and want to get something published on the site. Key takeaways for this section: look at sample class listings before you start. Make notes of what those teachers include, and you can add those to your class descriptions as well. Number 2, make sure that you are answering every question that is asked in this section. Write in full sentences, right? They want to make sure that you can effectively communicate in English. And consider writing out a class description that you ultimately do want to get published on the site. And then save it before you submit your application, because once you submit your application, I don't think you can go back to it. So make sure you save it in a separate place so that you can use that later. Once you finish with step 3, you just have one more step to go, and that is actually creating a video of you teaching. This video will stay private. Nobody has to see it, but it's a way for Outschool to kind of see what your classroom space is going to look like and get an idea of how you teach and whether or not that's going to be a good fit for the learners on their platform. It should be between 3 and 5 minutes. You are going to be teaching the class that you described above, so make sure that your class description, and I know this part might feel kind of awkward because you're teaching to no one, but do your best to show your personality, to be animated and excited, because remember, you're teaching students through a screen. So in order to capture their attention and keep them engaged, you are going to want to be high energy, right? Because otherwise the kids are just going to be like, why should I pay attention to you? So, definitely some things that you want to make sure that you do because they list them right here is you want to show us and show off the space you will teach from. So, make sure that wherever you're recording this, that it's also the place where you will in fact be teaching. Make sure that it has good lighting. Maybe you have a little teacher sign that it looks nice and clean, not overly distracting. You want to make sure you're showing them your teaching personality. So, behave as you would if you were actually teaching to students, and then share your expertise, right? Teach something that you are excited to share with learners on Outschool. So make sure that it is what you have written in your class description. It should be the same. Only has to be about 3 to 5 minutes. I know a lot of teachers will kind of pretend that it's the beginning of their class. So, they'll welcome in their students. They'll say, "Oh, hello, everybody. I'm so happy for you to be here. My name is Teacher Jocelyn. Let's do a quick attendance. So when I say your name, raise your hand or you can give a little wave or share, your favorite animal or your favorite artist or your favorite word in Spanish, right? Kind of relate it back to your topic and actually pretend that you're engaging with students. So I definitely suggest making up a few names of students in your classroom so that when you ask a question, you can say, "Oh, yes, Johnny, what do you think about this?" So again, I know it feels a little awkward, but they'll kind of see how you are going to engage and speak with your students, right? Those are different things that they are definitely going to want to see. And you do have some options when you go to either record or upload your video. When I applied, I just recorded using Outschool's recording process. So if I click record or upload video here, you want to make sure that you are allowing Outschool to get access to your microphone, right? Because otherwise it's not going to record any of your audio. And then it's going to load here. And then you could just click this record button and you could record. So if you're not planning on, I'm going to X out of this because it's a little trippy seeing myself twice. So if you're not planning on incorporating like a Canva presentation or some other online tool, then I would just suggest just recording your video and maybe utilizing some props like a little whiteboard if you have one, or maybe if you have some little props, some little flashcards, things like that to kind of catch the attention of your students and the hiring team at Outschool. But if you do want to include a presentation and kind of film something like I'm filming here, where like you can see me up top, but then you can also see like what I would potentially screen share with students, then you might want to consider like recording something in Zoom. That might be the easiest because you can have a free account with Zoom. And once you teach on Outschool, you will have to use Zoom. So that's definitely a decision for you to make. I just chose to record using their system, but you're also welcome to kind of do some editing and if you want to, screen share something with your students and screen share something with the hiring team like a presentation, then I would suggest uploading the video and maybe first recording it through Zoom, or I use Streamlabs. So there's definitely different ways that you can record something, screen share, edit it, and then upload it. And once you finish that, you can click this nice big button down at the bottom and submit your application. And of course, make sure that you first agree to the terms of service, class content policy, and community standards. And there you have it. That is the application process. It is 4 steps. It is going to take a little bit of time, but once you've completed this process, you've also basically created a class that you can potentially post on the platform, and you've kind of done a dry run through of how you want to teach some aspects of it with your video. So although it might take a little bit of time for you to go through each of these steps, it's a little bit like training you to actually be a teacher on the platform, which is pretty cool. So this brings us to the end of our video for today. I hope you found it helpful. If you have any other questions about the application process or you want some support as you go through the steps, please feel free to comment down below, reach out to me on Instagram, and I'd be happy to offer you some more guidance. I will leave my referral link down below. If you found this video or other videos that I've created helpful, please consider using that referral link. It definitely is much appreciated, and I'm always happy to help you further with the process if you feel like you need a little bit more guidance. So I will leave those links down below. Feel free to check out my other Outschool videos, which I will leave up above, and I hope to see you in the next video. Have a great day and happy teaching, teacher friend.